Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Onion Soup. I'm so excited to have our guest with us today, Mr. Dave Holmes. How are you doing?
Great. Dexter, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and I'm just excited to talk to you because, today's topic is about Zen Buddhism and philosophy. So just really quickly, tell us about, what you do in the book that you wrote.
Sure. So the book that I wrote, I'll hold it up just so you can kind of see it. It's called Zen and the Art of Anal Bleaching, a Backdoor Journey From Darkness to Light. And it's a novel. My pen name is Old Harry Jesus. And the reason I wrote it's not a how-to book, by the way. It's an actual story, but is kind of a spoof on Zen and the art of motorcycle magnets, Zen and the art of arteries, the Zen and the art of everything, right? And a number of years ago, I remember when I read Zen and the art of motorcycle magnets, which I enjoyed, but it was pretty dry. There wasn't much of a plot really, and you really had to kind of slog through a lot of like philosophical stuff and then to get the message, And I thought, you know what? Why can't concepts around Buddhism be something that can be brought across in a story that's contemporary, in Western type of culture, that's funny and enjoyable, and people can enjoy the story for what it is. And then also you go as deep as they want to, take a lot of what's coming out of that story that reflects those Buddhist principles and be able to, view their life relative to that and think about it, but have it also show in this guy's journey of kind of self-discovery, how that plays out, but not with a bunch of terms like dukkha and dharma and karma and that kind of stuff, which can oftentimes turn some people off to the concepts, right? So I said, okay, let's create a fiction, a humorous fiction book, and name it something outlandish and create a story that people can just enjoy. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So, Dave, tell us a little bit, what is Zen exactly? I feel like there's a lot of confusion around the word Zen.
Well, Zen is interesting because we're really talking about kind of Buddhism, right? And Buddha ran around and for a lot of years taught the basic fundamental principles of Buddhism, and then different groups then started to kind of adapt that in certain ways and certain types of practices, right? And I mean, the Zen practice, which originated in Japan, is more strict, but there's a lot of sitting, eyes open, just being aware of your thoughts and all that. There's usually a master, someone that's attained a certain level of awareness, right? That you might help try to kind of help you disassociate your identification maybe with your ego or your mind by using cones, these kind of riddles that really you almost can't solve, but yet it causes your mind to kind of snap in trying, And so Alan Watts was really big in bringing kind of the concepts of Zen Buddhism to the West, in the 60s and 70s and all. So it's really just kind of a flavor of Buddhism, but ultimately, those nuances that make it Zen are really kind of more that institutional approach to practice, but it doesn't really differ from the fundamentals of kind of Buddhist psychology, right? And I think that I was a psychology major in college, and what was interesting is my senior year, I needed to take another course, and there was a course in the psychology department that was called Limits of Consciousness, and I thought, that sounds kind of interesting. And so it was taught by this professor. His name was Gordon Becker, but also he happened to be a Zen priest. And so the whole course was really kind of challenging us to understand our mind and how our mind worked and what caused us to become attached to things and resistant to things and defensive and all. And it was fascinating. And it really made me realize, okay, no wonder this is being offered as a psych course, because Buddhism is really a psychology. It's how does the mind work and operate, and what is the effects does that have on us? It's not a deity-based religion where there's a worshiping of some, external god, that type of thing. And I think that most people assume, that in the West that aren't familiar with it, oh, Buddhism is a religion, Hinduism's a religion, whatever. But it's really not. You could apply it to anybody, regardless of what your religious orientation is, and you could still use it as a tool for self-understanding and self-awareness. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question.
No, no worries. It's interesting because I tell people all the time that Buddhism is not a religion. It's more of a way of life. It's a philosophy, and it's all about self-awareness. But I'm interested in something you mentioned about the limitations of consciousness and awareness. So what are those limits to consciousness?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, in that class, I think, what the title of the class that the Zen priest was teaching was really, where are your limits that affect, how you perceive, life, reality, what bothers you, what's important, what's, gets reactions and all that. And so, that at a very personal level, everybody kind of bumps into their own limits, right? Whereas I think that ultimately the whole idea of Buddhist practice or Zen practices, we identify with our thinking mind and our self-image and our beliefs as the totality of who and what we are. And we create a story about ourselves. And here's our past, and here's kind of, what we like, and here's what we're good at, and here's what we're not, and here's what we've attained, and here's what we want to attain. And it's all thought-based constructs and ideas. And of course, we leave out parts of our lives that maybe don't tie into our story, and we accentuate the pieces that tie into the story that we want to believe is a more favorable concept of who we are when we're communicating to people and all that. But still, it's all just a thought-based thing. And the idea of practicing, being just aware of those thoughts is eventually seeing those thoughts come and do their thing and their dance, and they come and they go, but realizing, hey, what part of me is observing these thoughts? And these thoughts exist within a certain awareness of just being that is greater than the thoughts themselves. And when those thoughts stop, and it might be just a couple seconds, you're meditating and then you forget you're meditating and you're thinking about something else, and 5 minutes later but when those thoughts do settle down, there is still some general awareness that is there, right? And that eventually we start to break the identification with those thoughts and those ideas and our story, and realize what that is, and shift our awareness to that kind of just conscious being that sits and embraces all of that. And that's this transformation of kind of self-discovery that, hey, don't get lost in the play, right? We have our costume on, we're on this stage, and we've got our role, and then we start to believe that we are the role. It'd be like an actor being on stage, forgetting who they really were, and totally losing themselves in the play, right? And that's, I think, kind of the nature of how we tend to operate if we're not really thinking about it, right? So that kind of is how I interpret the limits of consciousness. Other people may have different ideas, but that's my take on it.
I love that. So what you're saying is that the limits of consciousness is our own self-awareness, and the way that you expand that awareness is to do Zen Buddhism, sit in silence and learn to be more aware.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point about the Zen practice is sitting, and you recommend. I mean, you're sitting, you're kind of looking at a blank wall, but your eyes are open, so it's giving you an opportunity to practice that awareness, but yet with your visual senses being on and all, because then it's a little easier to take that out into your daily life, right? So you're going for a walk, and you're maybe focusing on your breath and senses, sights and sounds are coming in and they're going, and you say, okay, I'm not going to follow and chase those, let them come, let them go, and just kind of be, right? And so how then do you take it from sitting on the zafu, staring at a wall, to start to practice it, throughout your day periodically when you're, you remember to it? Can you spend a greater portion of our time being right here, right now, in the only reality that exists, which is this ever-changing present moment? And this moment changes into the next moment, into the next moment. But the past only exists in our thoughts. In the future, it only exists in our thoughts. And our idea of who we are and our story only exists in our thoughts. But those things are transitory and they come and they go. But there is something that is always there, and that's the present now moment. And it's really about practicing connecting and being in that moment and losing that division, that sense of separateness that we tend to have, and having a more connected experience.
What would you say to somebody who says, I hear that there's the now and the past is the past, future is the future, but I'm having struggles and problems right now. Financial issues, relationship issues, health issues. How do you get somebody into a place of peace, Zen, if they're having these type of problems?
But I think that you bring up a good point, because we have to navigate around in our life, right? We can't just sit there and not think about anything ever and just hope that food appears and that we're not evicted from our apartment, or that our car needs to be fixed so we can make it to work. I mean, we still have to participate, right, in that. And there's times where our mind is critical to being able to navigate and stay alive, right, and deal with those problems. And there's a lot of things that come up that we have to deal with, whether it's the health of a loved one is at risk, right, or we have a child that needs attention, and and all of it. We need to be able to engage and respond. And I think that it's for me at least, being aware of when is it time to solve those problems. And right now, okay, I need to think through my finances and come up with a strategy and use my mind to make that work. And that's what I'm doing right now. And so for the next half hour, whatever, I'm going to really work on that and realize that there's time for that. And I need to be engaged. But it doesn't mean that all my time has to be spent in living possible future scenarios in my mind and worrying about it. So it's like, you use the mind, solve the problems, live your life, deal with obstacles and challenges, but yet realize that that's what's happening at that moment, and then take a step back, right? And in taking that step back and then seeing kind of those thoughts dissolve, you remind yourself, ultimately, I'm more than just those thoughts, right? So that would be my advice to those people. It's not a denial of the reality that we all are wake up in every morning, but it's a way to navigate that in perhaps a healthier way, where we become less attached to certain things, right? And one of some of those things, you hear about attachment, and attachment is the root of suffering, and that's a consistent Buddhist theme, right? And people say, well, okay, well, what if I'm not attached to having a bigger house, or attached to having a nicer car, or attached to people like me, or whatever? I mean, it's not just physical things going on. I mean, we become very attached to our beliefs and our thoughts and maybe our self-image, and then we want to be perceived as a nice, loving person. And someone says, here's an example of you being a total jerk, and that threatens our concept. And now we're suffering, or we have a belief that people should drive responsibly and signal when they change lanes, and someone doesn't, and just cuts in front of you, and now we're furious. It's like, so there's a lot of different internal attachments or aversions that we have, and being aware of those and not trying to force them away, but just seeing them suddenly causes those over time to be amusing, but not quite as ensnaring, right? They don't take over, and we're not pouring fuel on that fire and going down that rabbit hole, right?
Open your mind and expand your consciousness. Welcome to Chakra Wonders, where style meets soul. Designed to uplift your energy and inspire your path to higher awareness. Every piece is a reflection of the cosmos and the power within you. Explore our collection and discover what resonates with your soul. Visit chakrawonders.com and step into conscious living. Chakra Wonders, conscious style for a conscious world.
You mentioned amusing, and your book, from my understanding, takes more of a humorous, approach. How do you apply humor to serious situations?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not easy because, but what I found is that humor can be kind of disarming, right? I mean, say you're reading a part of a story and there's a funny dialogue going on, and someone is saying some witty things or off the wall things, and then next thing you know, there's someone is spouts something that maybe is very philosophically insightful. Well, it creates an opening where our defenses are down, where we can maybe hear that and think, well, that's interesting, right? As opposed to some huge, logic-driven pyramid of rationale for something, right? So it can create, I think, the reader to be in a comfortable, happy place, enjoying something, and you're going to be more open to what comes next, oftentimes, because the plot's leading you in there, and it's not like you got some dry, didactical, just theory book type of thing. So that's my approach to it. And it's a little bit more fun to write humorous fiction too.
It is. It is. It's funny because you mentioned how humor can be very disarming. And I, at this point in life, don't take very much very seriously. I wasn't always like that. And I just kind of laugh at everything. Do you ever find that humor comes off as disingenuous to others?
Yeah, I'm sure. I can't control what other people think, right? And I'm sure there's going to be people that are going to think exactly that, and other people might not think that at all, right? I think my opinion is if you're generally a compassionate, loving person, and you're joking around, but people can sense that, right? And I mean, and there's humor that is condescending, that is judgmental. There's all that kind of thing, and that can rub people the wrong way, and it's not always positive, right? But a lot of life is so absurd and so unexpected, and you have to laugh sometimes. I mean, at the way things unfold, or even the predicaments we find ourselves in. And when I was younger, one of my best friends, a guy named John Sunderland in Omaha, Nebraska, he's still a dear friend. John was born with this innate, this brilliance and he would find himself in all sorts of horrible situations, relationship situations, work situations, whatever. And he was always able to laugh at the absurdity of the situation. And whereas I would get, reactive in those situations and, frustrated and very serious, and he would just be, just laugh at the cosmic joke of the whole thing. And just naturally he'd find the humor and everything. I thought, God, what a wonderful way to navigate through life, because he's spending more happy hours than the average person, and it wasn't necessarily by choice. I think he just saw humor in everything, right? And I've tried to emulate that, practice that, and it's easy to practice in some situations, but we all have our triggers. There's the things that still get us, and so it's a practice that keeps going on even to this day.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think you're 100% right. We can't control how other people respond, and we can only control ourselves. And you mentioned how your friend would be, something's going on and you're getting triggered by that. Why do you think others, or we, get triggered by the actions of others that really don't have anything to do with us?
I think it has to do with, we have an idea of who we think we want to be, or we're hoping to be, and we want validation of that. And we don't appreciate that being challenged. And when you think about your friends we have, relationships we're in, it's usually because the people validate our story, and we can feel that good about our story. We don't hang out with people that challenge our beliefs constantly, self-image constantly, and put our identity at risk. And I think that people ultimately want validation, and they're hoping that they are perceived as who we want to perceive that we are. But again, I mean, that we're looking for external validation, and I think that causes people to tend to get riled up and triggered.
Interesting. I like that. So we're more so, instead of looking for external validation, we should all be focusing on, internal validation, making sure that we're good with ourselves on the inside.
Yeah. I mean, and it really, I think it boils down to, can you love yourself and your flaws and everything else, and accept our flaws? I was talking with another buddy of mine who's really a sharp guy named Steve, and he said, it's really hard because, I grew up in a family where, my dad was a macho guy, blue collar worker. You had to be tough and all this stuff. And your men are supposed to have thick skin and, not be rattled by stuff. And he's, and so I'm, spending so much effort, presenting that dimension, that persona. Right. But he said, I realized, what? I'm a pretty sensitive guy. And, I get bothered easily by things. And then I tend to mope around a lot afterwards when I feel like someone doesn't understand where I'm coming from or whatever. And, after 50 something years, I realize that's not really going to change. And can I just love myself, Steve, for who I am and see that pattern go, there's Steve getting defensive again. Here's Steve sulking. That's just kind of my pattern, and accept that and just let it be instead of trying to change it, deny it, suppress it. And all, and I think that acceptance of yourself, the good with the bad or whatever, I believe allows it a much easier path to accept others and all the dimensions of them. I mean, we're all doing this human experience and it's hard, right? And it is challenging and it pushes us to our limits consistently. And, if we can't let ourselves off the hook and just love ourselves, I mean, it gets pretty hard to do that to other people, right?
So is that where the other half of the title of the book comes from, The Art of Anal Bleaching? So like cleaning out or deconstructing your perception of self?
Well, yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, ultimately, it's like, we're a dirty mirror, right? I mean, and you gotta get the crap beliefs and the attachments to X, Y. We're trying to make it cleaner and clearer so we can eventually just kind of see who we really are, right? And also, I mean, and in the book, it's kind of funny because this guy's a Silicon Valley tech worker, and his job, implodes, and his family implodes, and the next thing you know, I mean, he's living in a crap apartment, right? And he's trying to. I got to reconstruct my life. I got to get back on track. I got to get another job. And of course, the universe isn't cooperating. And he was, you can't get a reference from anyone he worked with in the past because he was such an arrogant jerk and that type of stuff. And he can't stand the homeless people and everything else. But ultimately, there's a homeless guy encamped with his dog, like right outside the guy's house. And eventually, they get into conversation, and he starts to realize this guy's kind of pretty smart. And he asked me, he knows what I'm thinking half the time and asks me questions that I got to go kind of contemplate. And, this guy becomes almost like a mentor and never asks anything from him. And he suddenly starts to reconsider everything and how he's thinking. And he kind of goes through a deconstruction of identity and ego in that, and then ultimately in the process, finding what's underneath all that and who he is. And his life becomes very different than he would have ever imagined, but yet he's much happier and more content, and has to kind of reconcile, all of that. And so that's kind of the journey, this backdoor journey from darkness to light that's going on for this character. And there's a bunch of other funny characters in the book and a lot of humorous scenarios and stuff. But anyhow, that's
Interesting. So like you're with the character in the story who's so true to like all of us in our lives, right? Oftentimes we get off what we would consider off track or derailed. But what are your thoughts on, maybe you're not being derailed, maybe you're just being pointed into a different direction for a quote unquote better life for yourself?
I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? I mean, I think that as long as we understand it for what it is, right? It's like, okay, look, I want to create. I mean, we're kind of co-creators in this existence, right? And I kind of want to create this type of life. And, whether that is, a certain profession or certain types of relationships, or maybe you want to travel more, whatever it happens to be. And, let's see if we can do that. Now, if it doesn't work out or we meet resistance, I mean, let's not melt down and freak out, and see it for what it is. And all of that, trying to create whatever type of life creates great feedback for us along the way. And where do we really get wrapped around the axle? How come it's so important to me to have a VP title at my job or what? I got passed over for this promotion. I'm furious. And is there an opportunity to say, okay, well, what's the belief underneath it? Is it like I'm not okay unless I am able to demonstrate I've risen up, professionally to a certain rank? Is that because I have a belief, perhaps inculcated through family values, that your worth is based upon your career success? Okay, well, that's interesting. I've got that belief. I don't know if that's true. Maybe I should think about that a little more. Yeah, I mean, so sometimes these journeys and we create, and we can create oftentimes wonderful lives for ourselves. But the resistance is where the lessons are oftentimes to,
Mm.
or at least the opportunities to understand ourselves better. If we're willing to look, and you have to be kind of brave to sometimes see things that you might not want to see or that might not be as flattering. But the mirror is always there if you want to look into it, right?
Yeah. I love that. I love that, taking almost the productive approach towards life. What is it about this that I'm truly seeking? Am I truly seeking that title? Am I truly seeking a sheet of paper to validate my intelligence? Or am I just looking for some type of stability? And can that stability be found, somewhere else?
When I think we all want a certain amount of predictability and stability, right? Yeah, if every day we woke up and didn't know how we're going to eat, how we're going to survive, and the elements, and all that kind of, if we're going to get attacked or not. I mean, that's pretty unsettling, way to go through life. And I think that people see a certain amount of predictability because then they can feel like they can relax a little bit.
Mm.
But yet life is never totally predictable. So how do we roll with when the unpredictable happens? Are we curious and think, oh, that's fascinating. It'll be interesting to see how I get through this. And maybe I got to take it one step at a time because I don't see a path. But things will continue to change and a path may open up. Or do we melt down and and suddenly we become immobilized, right? And that happens to everybody at different times too. But we just got to love ourselves and be compassionate kind of along the way, and give ourselves a little bit of a break. So I think sometimes we put so much more pressure on ourselves than anyone else would ever put on us or expect from us.
Yeah. No, I love that. My saying for this past year has been, give yourself the same amount of grace that you would give somebody else.
I love that. That's great, Dexter. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That,
Well,
that, you hit it in a nutshell, man.
right. Well, Richard, Dave, we only have a few minutes left. Is there anything you would like to leave with the audience before we go?
I think I would just say, hey, try to enjoy, find the humor in life. Try not to take it too seriously. I mean, love the people you're around and realize we don't know how long we got on this path, right? And to be able to even exist, period. The fact that there's something versus nothing, to be able to exist and be a part of this dance for a flash in the pan, number of years, it's kind of a privilege, right? And so you try to appreciate it. When you're driving down the street, think, hey, this could be the last time I ever drive down this street. Or, this could be the last time, I walk in and see my family. A meteorite could hit us tomorrow. But when you look at it like, hey, this could be the last time, suddenly we become very aware and very appreciative. And we are looking around and seeing what's there and not in our minds. So you think, hey, if this is the last time you do this one particular thing or see this one particular thing, appreciate it and be grateful for it and take it in, because we don't know how much longer we have.
I love that. Take every second of life and just be grateful for it. I live my life like that.
Well, good for you. Good for you. You probably have a lot of happy moments, right?
Yeah, I try. I try. But Mr. Dave, thank you so much for coming on. And I
And my
want to thank you
pleasure.
all for tuning into this episode of Onion Soup. As always, please have a blessed rest of your day.